Good morning, Grace. I'm going to be doing a lot of reading because I tend to ramble if I don't, so just FYI. And then we'll be here till 6. So, I was raised in a Christian family. I accepted Jesus in my heart when I was 5, baptized when I was 12, in the church I grew up in. I was very active in my youth group, drama team, even the mime team we had at church. Yes, we had a mime team. I loved Jesus. I wasn't ashamed to shout it to the world. But I also loved being the center of attention. Honestly, I still do. And I struggled with insecurity, trying to fit in, and wanting to feel accepted by everyone. In high school, I made poor decisions due to that. When I was 16, my poor judgment led me in a car with my boyfriend and his friend late at night. We ended up getting in a car accident. My boyfriend died. I was traumatized. This event led me into a downward spiral. Fast forward a couple of years, my friends and I were just living it up, going out, and I discovered this place called Dearborn. It was filled with beautiful, tall, dark, and handsome men that drove nice cars. And they all liked me and gave me attention. I was on cloud 9, okay? So, started going out there with my friends, and I was trying to fill the void to heal my self-esteem and help me forget any pain I had ever felt. This is how I met my now ex-husband and father of my kids, Ahmad, or as you may know him, Chewy, and Alex. I met Rami at a gas station. We exchanged phone numbers. Rami and I instantly clicked because he had a very fun personality. We joked around a lot, laughed, and we had a lot of deep, meaningful talks, mostly about his life growing up in Lebanon, because he only had been here a year at this point. He was very charismatic as well. We instantly started seeing each other every single day. There was a problem, though, a very huge problem I kept overlooking. Not only were we unequally yoked, because he was Muslim, he was very deeply rooted in old world Middle Eastern culture. My parents didn't like it. I even tried to tell my parents that he was Italian and his name was Roberto, but they didn't believe me. But I continued on anyway with that lie for a couple of months. Lord, forgive me. About 9 months of being with Rami, I became pregnant. I was about to turn 19. I was very, very nervous to tell my parents. My mom and dad were really hurt and upset, but they supported me and stood by my side. I had so many different people in my life outside of my family telling me to have an abortion because it was shameful that I had a child out of wedlock. Even Rami, my ex, was telling me to get an abortion because he didn't want to be a father. I refused to do that, of course. I knew in my heart, no matter how far I strayed from God, that this is a life created by God, and he gave me this child for a reason. I felt really guilty that I had sex outside of marriage because of my upbringing and had gotten pregnant, but I knew this child had a purpose in God's plan. The moment I became a mother is the greatest moment of my life. It is also the moment I started rebuilding my relationship with Jesus. I remember praying all the time. I was so worried I would be a selfish mother or an impatient mother. I was only 19 years old. I was a waitress at Ramshorn, and Rami took all of my paychecks, so I never had any money. I had no idea how I was going to support and raise a child. But I had the support of my family and the help from my parents, and God always provides. And at this point, I had a little baby boy that I loved more than anything in the world. I never knew how much you could love a human until I had a child. When Ahmad was about 6 months old, Rami and I got married in a church with all my family and friends. It was a fun wedding. God did try to stop me from marrying him, though. The pastor that was supposed to marry us, he called me a couple months before the wedding, and he told me that he wasn't going to be able to marry us anymore because God had told him that this wedding shouldn't be happening because we're unequally yoked, and he just had a really bad feeling from God about the wedding, me marrying him. But what did I do? My rebellious self? I found somebody in the Yellow Pages to marry us and proceeded to marry him. See, I was torn because my beliefs were construed. I thought that I was supposed to marry Rami because we had a kid, and I thought it would fix my sin of having sex outside of marriage. So my mistake is that I thought it was my works that saved me, and I didn't think I deserved the grace of forgiveness. 3 years later, we had Alexandra, had my little girl finally. Rami was never around to help because he was always going to the clubs and staying out all night, sometimes for days at a time. leaving me at home with 2 little ones, no money, no car. And when he was home, he became very abusive and impatient. There was a lot of abuse physically, verbally, and sexually that he put me through. From being locked in a dark cement basement alone all night, sexually abusing me in the most horrific ways you can imagine, locking me and Ahmad in a bedroom because I didn't have the house cleaned, dragging me across the lawn while I was 8 months pregnant while hitting me, forcing my son to sit still without speaking or crying for an hour, or he would smack him in the face and scream vulgar words at him, slamming my son's favorite toy trucks on the ground in front of him to break them just because Rami was in a bad mood, verbally abusing me and Ahmad and Alex, throwing objects at me, shooting Ahmad multiple times with a BB gun, punching me in the arm and hitting me in the head repeatedly, forcing me to drive him to meet up with other women. I always had bruises. I explained to others as just me being clumsy and falling. I wasn't allowed to cry. If I did, I was hit harder. I always cried, though. And when I defended my kids to him, I was smacked for that as well. But I never stopped defending them. But I was scared to leave him. He made me afraid to do anything. I didn't tell anyone in my family or my friends for the same reasons a lot of abused women don't speak up. They're afraid, ashamed, and embarrassed. Afraid of all the judgment and statements like, it wouldn't have happened if you wouldn't have married him. Or, why haven't you left him already? You're a terrible mother. And I was afraid of Rami hurting me or kidnapping my kids and taking them to Lebanon like he always threatened. I knew if someone retaliated against Rami, then he would retaliate against me and my kids, even more. Rami would tell me I make him hit me and I make him cheat. I was scared of him. My kids were scared of him. Me and Ahmad would both freeze up in fear when he was angry, like we were just waiting on edge for something bad to happen. I even once bought Rami a punching bag and hung it in hopes that he would hit that instead of me, but it didn't work. There was even a time Rami hid cocaine and stolen guns in our home to frame me if I ever left him. It was bad. I just want you to understand and get a feel of some of the stuff I went through. It would take me all day to tell you all the stories. This is just a small piece of the pie. I was always overthinking, anxious, and walking on eggshells. I was always praying that God would change his heart and lead him to Jesus and turn him into a godly father and a good husband. I consistently prayed this, but sometimes evil is just evil because it chooses to stay evil. Rami also was in and out of jail. He was involved with so many things that I was oblivious about. Along with taking drugs, he was dealing and transporting all kinds of drugs. He was convicted and put in jail a few times for theft, armed robberies, illegal dogfighting, and money laundering. I remember one time he came home in the evening with blood all over his shirt. He said, "Hurry up, get in the car. We have to go out to eat. I need an alibi." I was freaked out. I said, "What happened?" And he said, "Someone got beat that deserved it." I didn't ask any other questions. Just got in the car because I was afraid. I still don't know what happened to this day, and I don't want to know. But when I think about it, I get sick to my stomach. Not only did he abuse us, he also cheated on me with 46 different women. Yes, you heard me right. 46 different women. And I was really good with computers and became a really good investigator. I caught him almost every time. I'm still a pretty good investigator. So if you need me to find someone, hit me up. No. True story. He would always deny it, though, would tell me I'm crazy or I make him cheat. I even had to contact one of his girlfriends while I was in labor with Alex to let him know I was in labor. When my daughter Alexandra was born, I attempted to leave Rami. The day I came home from the hospital from having Alex, I was moving all of our stuff out of our house into my parents' house. He was holding Alex. He took my newborn daughter, held her by her feet, and threatened to drop her on her head. Seeing my 3-year-old son run over underneath his newborn sister with his hands in the air, screaming and crying, "No, Daddy, don't do that to my little baby sister," was the most heartbreaking thing I have ever had to experience in my life. My adrenaline must have just kicked in because I ran so fast and grabbed her out of his arms, grabbed Ahmad, hopped in the car, and we took off and left. I filed for divorce this time, a personal protection order, and it was over, so I thought. But Rami would always find a way to manipulate me, and I was weak because of everything I had went through, and he would find a way to get me back every single time. But this time, it had been a year. He got a hold of me a year later, told me he was seeing a therapist. He wrote me poems, love letters. He begged, cried, pleaded. He tried to say God wanted me to give him another chance. We were married, so we should have, all the works. He was good. He even went as far to convince my childhood pastor to call me and ask me to take him back. It messed with my already anxiety-ridden mind. So I took him back. It had been a year. Alex was 1, Ahmad was 4. I was reluctant to marry him again, but I did. We drove to the Ohio court and got remarried. I thought it might be different this time, but it was not. I still hadn't told anybody about the abuse or anything I had went through, so I really hadn't dealt with it yet. I was still in a broken place. And the abuse and infidelity, it just got worse and worse. He shut me out from talking to friends and family. There was even a time I wasn't allowed to leave the house without him knowing, wasn't allowed to use a phone without his permission. Whenever I could sense Rami getting angry or coming home angry, I would take my kids, put them in the car, and just drive around for hours to get away from him. I would tell my kids we're going on an adventure. They would get so excited. I would drive. Ahmad would talk for hours about Pokemon and WWE. Talk. That kid still likes to talk to this day. If you don't know, talk to him. He just. And Alex, she would get excited and pass out and sleep in the car. She still sleeps anywhere. Nap, game strong. I saw how this was affecting my kids emotionally, realized I had to do something about it, but how? I felt like I wouldn't ever be able to get away from him for good, but I knew I had to try. Had to try for my kids. They were my strength and my motivation. One evening, I was listening to worship. I remember this like it was yesterday, crying out to God to help me just get out of this and stay away from it. I pulled out my Bible that day and looked up scriptures on fear, like how you can go in the back and just look fear and find some verses. And I found Hebrews 13:5. God said to me, I will never fail you. I will never abandon you. And I started to believe God's going to come to my rescue. Then I went on to read 2 Timothy 1:7. God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. I cried and I prayed and I knew God was going to get me out of this for good. I just needed a plan and a whole lot of Jesus to help me. So I made a plan. I was going to take the next year of my life to emotionally, spiritually prepare to leave him for good. I continued to do my devotions daily, started going over to my cousin's house with my kids all the time. We would take our kids every day after work to the playground. It helped me rediscover who I am as a mom instead of the abused, broken down woman I had felt like for so long. Rami gave up on trying to keep me home or keep tabs on me at this point because he had become so immersed in his lifestyle of crime and drugs and cheating. He was barely ever around. 1 year later, I divorced him, once and for all. God kept us safe. Rami didn't come around much, and he didn't cause any harm. God had his hand on us the whole time. Then in 2011, he was deported back to Lebanon because the life of crime caught up to him. I was able to get us all into Christian counseling, and going through that helped us all heal so much. I'm thankful I left when my daughter was 4 years old, my son was 7, and I didn't look back. With everything we went through, my kids and I should have so many emotional issues, but they do not because God sent people into their lives to help them. I had my father and my brothers in my kids' lives as father figures and role models of godly men. During every season of my kids' lives, God has placed someone in their life that would be there for them. God saved us from a situation that could have and should have ended up so much worse. You see women and children dead or missing in the news all the time from the stuff we went through. My kids should be so emotionally damaged right now, have daddy issues and all kinds of issues. But God comforted them. We could have ended up a statistic in the news. My kids could have been kidnapped to Lebanon. We could have ended up dead in one of his fits of rage. But God had his hand on us for his protection through it all because he had a different plan. I became a strong single mom who worked hard to provide for her kids. I went to college, received my degree in IT, and now I'm a successful information technology analyst for Trinity Health. God has brought different people in my life that I've been able to pray for, empathize with, or use my story to encourage. When I left this relationship, I had anxiety, depression, self-worth issues, and PTSD. I was so broken, but the Lord helped me pick up the pieces. I still struggle with some anxiety from my situation, but I am nowhere near where I was. God's love healed my wounds into battle scars. Yes, I'm still single, but now I know my worth comes from God and not a relationship status. My daughter Alexandra, she's 16 years old. She's a student leader here at Grace. She's bold in her faith. She has so much love and joy in her soul. I am amazed at how God uses her to encourage others. When I see her praying with someone, it literally brings tears to my eyes when I see her worshiping up there. And my son Ahmad, same thing. It brings tears to my eyes when I see him, how God's changed them. And he's now a working college student, a youth leader here at Grace. He's filled with so much compassion. That boy, he just recently was a leader at camp, leading and loving on others. I've watched God heal so much of his anxiety and use his experiences to help him encourage and pray for others and just be there for others. It's been amazing looking back and seeing how much my kids and myself grew into who God intended us to be. I learned through all of this, absolutely nothing is impossible with God. Thank you.